Oh, hey, I'm Snow, and you're listening to The Vanishing Hour. Good morning, everyone. It's fucking October already. Holy shit. This is so cliche, but literally I have no idea where the fuck this year went. I know I was here for it. I know I did things, but I don't know why. I feel like it should be June, maybe, somewhere around June. It's still sweaty ass season over here, though, which makes you feel robbed of the fall season. Anyway, so some quick little updates. If you haven't heard already, there's been an update in one of the cases we previously covered, the Faith Hedgepeth case. Police got a DNA match to the crime scene to some schmuck who is denying even meeting Faith. Not a whole lot of info has been released yet, but I will be checking up on it in the coming weeks to further update. But in the meantime, check out the case update I've posted a few days ago, I believe. I briefly go over if or if not these developments have changed my thoughts or theory on the case. So again, head over, check it out, or even listen to the original if you haven't heard the original episode yet. I think it's episode 3 or 4, I'm not sure. One of the first ones I did, so it probably sounds like shit, but there's good content in there. That case was very compelling, and I'm excited that there's movement in it. Also, I finally got around to creating a Facebook page for the podcast. I probably update it a little more often than I do any of the other social media outlets. But if Facebook isn't your thing, we are on Twitter and Instagram as well as YouTube, where I do plan on eventually posting videos on there that correspond with the podcasts. They take a millennium to create, so they probably won't be coming up anytime soon. But if you want to check out the one I did post, I put a lot of effort into that one. That one is for the Mikkel Biggs case. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, check out the video on YouTube. It's really good, and I'm super proud of it. Also, last thing, if any of this interests you, I've started up crafting again. I'm a big, huge crochet fan. I like to crochet things. If you're interested in checking some of those out, they will also be on the social media page too. Usually I'll be crocheting while doing research for cases, so they kind of correspond, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, let's get started on the case we are covering today. This case gave me instant Elisa Lam vibes, for those of you familiar with that hell of a case, which I do totally plan on covering at some point. I've been waiting to cover this case, though, for a couple months, mainly in hopes that I would somehow stumble upon more information regarding it, because there really is just not much, which is very strange. I did find some articles that stated that it's been ruled an accidental case and is now closed, which I haven't confirmed that. And usually I don't cover closed cases. It's not completely off the table, but I do want to cover this one whether it's closed or not, because the information and circumstances around it kind of have me believing that there is no possible way that this is accident. There's almost no physical possible way for that to be. I also wanted to bring awareness to this case. I feel bad because this one seems to have just been passed over these past 5 or 6 years. It does have a justice page on Facebook, but there's maybe a handful of people that are following it. It hasn't been updated since 2016, which was a year after the death of the victim we're going to talk about today. So on the off chance that this case isn't accidental and should still be open, if it isn't, I want to bring awareness to that. So with that, enough rambling. The case we are covering today is the Vanishing of Janina Vasquez. So like I said a few minutes ago, this one was a little difficult to research. There just wasn't a whole lot of info. And I didn't want to be like an asshole and bombard the family on Facebook with like messages. I know some people do that. I personally, I think it's hard enough that people are talking about their loved ones who are gone. So why, throw salt in the wounds and bug them for information? I don't do that. But I did find enough for an episode today, and a lot of disturbing and questioning facts came up. So with that, Janina was born on August 23rd, 1987, which made her 27 at the time of her death, if I mathed right there. She lived in Overland Park, Missouri, with her mom, Jen, and her stepfather, whose name I could not find. She does appear to be the younger of two children in her family. I found pictures of her with an older brother, from what I could tell. She was a huge animal lover. Of the maybe 20-something photos I could find of her, I'd say at least a third, if not half of them, were of her with animals, in particular dogs. She had like a sense of artsiness about her, and her family described her as warm and genuine. She was open and honest and giving, and she didn't like to limit herself as far as interests either. She loved everything from fashion to music to painting to gymnastics to soccer and diving. I think one of my favorite photos that I came across of her was a prom photo where she's wearing this beautiful black satin halter style dress. And she has this deep violet hair that's nicely curled, and she has like soft lavender eyeshadow, and she has a labrae piercing, which is that piercing right in the middle of your bottom lip. I loved it. I instantly identified with her. I loved her style. I thought she looked amazing, and I just wanted to like instantly know her and be her friend and do all this moody emo girl shit that I love with her. As she got older, though, her style kind of shifted and changed into more of like a boho hippie vibe, which I'm loving. She grew her hair out long, and she wore bright, beautiful colors that expressed her personality. You could just tell this chick was awesome and full of sweet happiness and honey. She can be seen posing with her mom, who she was super close with, and her grandmother as well. She planned on studying art and psychiatric nursing, so she had recently enrolled and was attending Johnson County Community College so that she could pursue those passions. Life, however, wasn't always easy for Janina. At some point after high school and before her death, it sounds like she was involved in a horrible accident, which possibly was involving like vehicles that had her in the hospital for some time. She suffered from extensive injuries, and while she did make a recovery, she ended up sustaining issues that affected her way of life from that point on. She lived in constant, intense pain from the aftermath of this accident and was on several medications that she had to take daily, including anxiety medication for PTSD. Some articles stated she suffered from muscle weakness, and her mother did say that she also suffered from frequent seizures. I'm not positive if she was actually diagnosed with something like epilepsy or not. But regardless, seizures were a constant issue she had to overcome. But despite all of this, she didn't let it hinder her in any way. She just kept pushing through all of that, and she ended up pursuing all of her desires in spite of it. With her mom's help and company, Janina was honestly headed towards an amazing and exciting future, which makes what happened to her all the more upsetting. Plus, with the outcome of the case, it's not good. So on the day of February 11th, 2015, it pretty much started out like any other day. Nothing really seemed amiss. Janina left her house that day to go about her usual business. It wasn't until later on that night when things seemed to get odd. At around 10 p.m., Janina sent a text to her stepdad and her mom stating that she was going to spend the night with, quote, Alan and Nicole. Sounds like a pretty normal text, right? The only issue was that her parents had never even heard of Alan and Nicole, ever. And they were very close with Janina and very involved with her life. They were her main support system after the accident, and Janina relied on them a lot, and it was odd that she would be spending the night with people her parents, up until this point, had never heard of, not even in like a casual passing. These people, as far as her parents were concerned, didn't exist. Janina didn't have a bunch of friends, which, same. At the same time, though, she was an adult, so it wasn't like her parents could tell her, nah, come home, or something like that. And Jen kind of was just of the mindset that maybe she had made some new friends fairly recently, and this was a good thing for her daughter. Besides, she was only planning on being gone for the night, and she packed medication for one night, she took her backpack with her, and she would be returning home the next day. Well, that didn't happen. Jen realized that Janina wasn't home the next day and that she hadn't heard from her. And because of this, she decided to report her daughter missing to the police. Now, I don't want to sound like a dick, but I am low-key surprised that the police took the case with it being under 24 hours of the daughter being missing. It always sounds like they are hard on that rule. Kids obviously are different, but teens and adults, I always feel like it's more of a, are you sure they didn't run away, or that they just want to be left alone for a bit? I mean, if I wasn't sure, would I be here reporting them missing? Come on. But police took the report and they actually began to investigate pretty quickly. Jen also continued to try to contact her daughter. She reached out to anybody that she knew, that Janina knew that she might be with. She started asking around town, hanging up flyers and searching for her daughter in places she thought she might be. Jen later states that during this time, she could just not shake this feeling that her daughter was cold. That motherly instinct shit is wild and terrifying and fascinating and almost always on point. Now, a week passed, and there was still no sign of Janina or where she had gone. That is until February 19th, 8 days after her family had last seen and spoke to her. The discovery was made by a city worker at Riverfront Park, located on the bank of the Missouri River in Kansas City. At the bottom of a 25-foot floodgate well was a woman. Police were called, the body was removed, and was later identified as Janina. Her family was obviously notified, and she was taken to the medical examiner's office to begin the autopsy process to find out how this happened, and hopefully clues as to why this had happened. Upon examination, though, more questions than answers began to arise. Janina was found with her gray Victoria's Secret sweatpants she was last seen wearing on, along with a red UGG type style boot that she was last seen wearing as well. However, she was missing her socks, her underwear, and her bra, as well as the burgundy backpack she had left with that night. She did have her gray Victoria's Secret sweatshirt. However, she wasn't wearing it. It was off and tied around her waist. Now, that wouldn't be unusual, except for the fact that this is mid-fucking February in Missouri, and the temperatures were below freezing, well below them. And they had been for the entire time that she had been missing. They did find her cell phone in one of her boots, and they found her ID card in the other boot. Now, nothing stated that the well was actually filled with water, but it was noted that she was found frozen solid. I couldn't find so much as a shred of the autopsy report, which was frustrating, but her cause of death was not listed as drowning. It was blunt force trauma to the back of her head, not the front, like if you fell face first into the well, but the back of your head. The blow was so strong it almost killed her instantly, the autopsy report allegedly says, according to all these articles that I'm reading. It didn't kill her instantly, but it very well could have, is what it stated. She was also noted to have both wrists broken. which again is just odd. Her injuries are very strange to me and make almost zero logical sense. Broken wrists would suggest he fell face first, with your arms kind of outstretched so as to break your fall, which you're actually not supposed to do. You're supposed to, like, ragdoll, I guess. But we do it instinctually when we brace for impact. But then she has this massive trauma to the back of her head, which makes no sense if she landed forward. Also, if she landed backwards, why are her wrists broken? Unless the injuries did not occur together and were at separate times. If she fell backwards and hit her head, why are her wrists broken? But if she fell forward, how is the back of her head injured? I'm just really fucking confused by that. However, this wasn't the only strange thing about Janina's death, though. Where she was found only brought up more questions and confusion. So like I said, it was a 25-foot well that may or may not have been filled with water at the time. That remains to be seen. But this well was secured by a huge, heavy iron metal grate, which I think at minimum weighs 25 pounds. Which, aren't they locked or secured in some sort of way with a lock? I've never seen a well just unlocked and hanging out for people to just casually access. But on top of that, this well was secured and completely enclosed by an 8-foot fence with an additional foot of chicken wire around the top of it, like they have like in prisons and shit, where they kind of like bend outward to make it harder for people to try to climb over. This legit looked like a prison gate around the entire well and its like pump station. It had like a tiny cement shack next to it. The well access point sits on top of like a 4 to 6 foot cement slab. So that also requires an additional like climbing aspect to get to it. Needless to say, I feel like this would be extremely hard for someone to scale over the gate of chicken wire, even in great shape, without injuring yourself. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. Now, if you didn't need to do any of that and had a key or access to this, that would make more sense. But I'll go over that later. Now, the police, I'm assuming, were suspicious of all of this strange information they were uncovering because they quickly released this information about Janina being found and her death being ruled, quote, suspicious, asking the public for any information or anybody who may think they saw something to come forward. The police then quickly began digging into the last known movements of Janina and retracing the information that they knew they could confirm in order to build a timeline of events. A timeline. Can't talk. Shit. They questioned Jen and her husband to reiterate the events of February 11th. And that's when the police were made aware of Alan and Nicole. My speech is just falling apart here. The wheels are falling off. Now again, Jen didn't know who these people were. So if she didn't know who they were, there was no way in hell the police would know who they were. But I am assuming they scoured Janina's social media profiles to see if there was any Alan and Nicole on there. I know I sure did. I did find on her personal profile both an Alan and a Nicole. But the relevance of that is unimportant, given this is, 6 years later, and plus I'd hope police already talked to these people. They didn't look like the killing type, but I mean, also isn't that like what most murderers hope to rely on, not looking like the killing type? But police also subpoenaed her cell phone records, and that is when they discovered their next clue. Police found that on the night of February 12th, the day after Janina's parents last spoke with her, her cell phone pinged off of a tower 1 mile away from this creepy-ass well, somewhere close to the corner of 5th and Cherry. So, this let them know that as of February 12th, somewhere close to 5th and Cherry, Janina's phone was at least being used, and that the probability that it was her using it was fairly high. Now, this does help a lot. I at least would think in an investigation like this, because police are dealing with an 8-day gap of a missing person. Did Janina die on the 11th, or did she die on the 18th, or was it somewhere in between? Knowing she was most likely alive and using her phone on the 12th, that not only shaves off a day that they can rule out, but now it gives them an area to scout out. There is a casino maybe only a mile southwest of the well, so police decided to check that place out. It is, a bigger destination in the area. Maybe she was there. And they decided to check everything between there, 5th and Cherry, and the well to see if maybe surveillance had caught her on camera. And they scored a few good chunks of evidence in doing this. Now, the casino, named the Isle of Capri, is a riverboat-looking casino. I don't think it's an actual riverboat, but it's built to look like one. Which, if any of you are from my neck of the woods, picture the Colorado Bell Hotel in Laughlin. It's literally that. There, police collect a video surveillance of Janina, again on February 12th at about 7:40 p.m. You can visibly see Janina exiting the building in a gray Victoria's Secret tracksuit, both the top and the bottoms on, not wrapped around her waist or anything like that, and she has her red boots on. But she is missing her burgundy backpack. This is concerning because that's where she would have kept her medication that she needed for that day. In a news clip set 1 year after her death, Jen says that Janina was apparently dropped off at the casino by this Allen fellow without her backpack, and that she can be seen on surveillance visibly distraught in the face as she leaves the casino and tries to flag down a ride from passing traffic, where she does end up getting into a red sedan that drives off. Now, I didn't see the actual footage personally, just still shots from it, and I can see Janina walking out of the casino. I can't tell if she's distraught from one photo, but if Jen, her mother, saw the video and could see the emotions and the actions and the body language and the gestures, then she probably was distraught when she was leaving that casino. Now, like I said, the footage does show her get into a car and take off. Janina is not seen on surveillance anywhere after this point. The footage they pulled from the park, however, shows this same red car that picked her up now in the riverfront parking lot with a timestamp of 7:45, so a mere 5 minutes later, which it's, again, only maybe a mile away, so that's completely plausible. The camera is on autopilot, so to speak, so it's rotating at a steady pace as the car is coming in. You see the car slowly drive towards the camera before turning into a parking spot, and then the camera is panning out of view as this happens. You do, however, see 2 other cars in the parking lot in the distance. I instantly wondered if people there were tracked down and questioned at all, or if these cars maybe belong to city workers. It's unclear. It's nighttime, it's dark, so all you can really see is what's lit up by the street lamps, which is the car coming in and the 2 parked in the distance. Now, interestingly enough, though, a news clip covering this stated that police said that between 7:40 p.m. that night and 10:10 p.m. that night is still unknown. They have no idea what's happened during that time frame. But that's a very specific time frame. I'm assuming that this window of time is what they've narrowed down to being her time of death. This was further supported when months later, I think like 6 months or something like that, police finally revealed to the public and to Janina's family that night on February 12th, Janina also had placed a 911 call from that park, or at least her phone did. It seems that the call did come in sometime around 10 p.m. However, it's not mentioned if there was actually any, talking on the call. The call had poor connection and subsequently was dropped. However, the dispatcher did send a police officer to investigate the park. Now, there are differing accounts of the amount of time spent searching the park after the call came in. Most lean on the side of saying that police cut the fucking corners and probably just like rolled through the parking lot, didn't see anything, and took off. Another report said that a uniform officer did do like a general scout of the area on foot with his flashlight, but didn't really see anything. Regardless, the investigation led to the assumption that Janina placed the call herself while she was at the bottom of the well. I don't know how they came to that conclusion. Again, that might be information that's been withheld, but kind of points to there being actual conversation in that call before it was dropped. But that, again, hasn't been confirmed. But police have said that she more than likely placed that call for help while she was at the bottom of a well. I feel like she was at the bottom of the well with this extensive head injury and broken wrists. How did she place the call? And then also remember, the phone's found in her boot when she's retrieved from the well. So broken wrists, massive head injury that eventually kills her. And she's placing a 911 call and is able to communicate that she is at the bottom of a well at this park and to come help her before the call drops and she puts the phone in her boot and then dies. That just doesn't add up to me. Now, the last release of information regarding Janina's case was a public plea for anyone who can identify this red sedan that picked Janina up from the Isle of Capri to come forward. There has since been no new info available, that I could find at least, that says they've had any movement or luck in identifying either Nicole or Alan or this red sedan, or if any witnesses have come forward. There's just nothing. The last you hear is the police releasing images from the surveillance footage at the park, asking for people to come forward with any information regarding this car. It's kind of just incredibly eerie that this case just dies off right here, at least in the media. This leaves me with tons of questions and many theory directions, so I'm going to try to gather all of this up here and like make my mental corkboard with red strings and pins and shit and just organize it. So let's go over the issues. Now, issue number 1 I have is with Alan and Nicole. Initially, my thought was that the text from Janina to her parents on the 11th wasn't actually her. I thought, if her own family doesn't know who the fuck Alan and Nicole are, and for her to stay at someone's house when she isn't really a huge social butterfly with tons of friends, it just seems off-scent. You feel me? I myself am in no way a social butterfly. If Shadow ever receives a text from me stating that I'm spending the night at anyone's house, abort, abort, abort. That is not me. I have been captured and held against my will. Report this immediately and get my ass found. I get anxiety just visiting family for an hour. You swear that I'm going to pack a bag and just spend the night with people nobody close to me have ever heard of. But then the surveillance footage of her on the 12th cropped up, and then she was found with her phone. So I was more likely to believe that the text was in fact from her. There's still a slight chance, maybe not, but it's highly unlikely. But then that brought up the issue of, was she lying to her parents about who she was with or where she was at, hence them not knowing who Alan and Nicole are? Or maybe did she spend the night with Alan and Nicole, but then requested to be left at Isle of Capri, to where she ended up meeting up with somebody she didn't want her parents to know about? Either way, Jen not knowing who Alan and Nicole are, or ever hearing them mentioned in passing, is just, it doesn't sit right with me. Whether they exist or not, I don't know. If they exist, why did she never mention them to her parents? If they don't exist, why did you lie and say you were with them? It makes me think maybe there were people or activities she was maybe involved with prior, and maybe her family requested she stay away from that, and this is her way of like sneaking around that. I don't know, but it's gonna drive me nuts. Now, issue number 2 is her cause of death and obviously the location. So, I already went over how weird her injuries are, but let's just recap a little. She is missing vital undergarments and is dressed just in sweatpants and a sweatshirt tied around her waist with boots. And it's the dead of fucking winter. Obviously, she was dressed to be indoors mostly because she didn't have like a heavy jacket or snow clothes, or I don't live in the cold, so I don't know what like proper attire is, but I do know that a sweatpants and shirt combo ain't it. So that tells me that her original plan wasn't to be outside for an extended period of time, especially at a park in the middle of the night. The missing undergarments, I don't know. It reads one of two ways for me. Now, in the past, before my crippling anxiety took over me and left me a shell of a human, I used to spend the night at friends' houses or, exes' houses. When I was planning to stay one night, I usually just packed a change of clothes. Maybe not a change of undergarments. Worst case scenario, I'd go commando if I forgot undergarments and didn't want to rewear the shit I had on. I don't usually like wearing the same shit more than one day in a row. I have weird fucking issues with that. But when I heard she was missing those items, but still wearing the same clothes that she was last seen in, I did momentarily picture either she spent the night and didn't bring a change of those with her, so she went commando like I would, or someone removed those in a very disturbing manner. Remember, she suffered from a bunch of health issues, and sometime around her death, she had sustained the 2 broken wrists and a severe head injury. If police believe this was an accident or even a suicide, why would you remove those items specifically before, let's say, jumping or whatever? The missing socks read to me more of a she spent the night, put all of her dirty stuff into like a bag, including her socks, and just decided to throw her tracksuit back on, fully expecting to be heading straight home. That's how it read to me. Now, I did see a theory online that maybe she visited someone at the Isle of Capri casino who was staying there at the hotel as well. Maybe shit went south there, which is why we see her leave allegedly distraught without a backpack, which probably had her underwear and shit in it. She leaves hastily, and that's where she gets into this unknown car. Now, I think that theory does play well with my initial impression, and both are completely plausible. Jen did say that the video showed Janina distraught as she was leaving. Now, as far as the location. So, last I could find, police were suspecting this to be an accidental death. Now, without further context, let's explore how they could possibly come to this conclusion. We have a physically disabled woman dead at the bottom of a 25-foot well that is guarded by a 25-pound iron grate that may or may not have had a lock on it. And this is only after you scale an 8-foot fence with an additional foot of chicken wire prison-style finish around the top of it. The gate door was closed and locked. There was no damage to the locks. So let's Dora explore this shit. She can't go through. She didn't dig a hole to go under. So unless she was with someone who had a key or could pick a lock without damaging it, she had to go over it. Now, for argument's sake, let's just say that in this moment, Janina was granted temporary immunity to her physical disabilities and was able to climb over this fucking gate without so much as a scratch on her from the chicken wire. Again, there was no mention made of scratches. I mean, if you had to climb over a chicken fence, I'd imagine you'd get cut up somehow. However, I guess theoretically, if she took her sweatshirt off and laid it over the top of the chicken wire and then climbed over, jumped, landing on both wrists wrong, breaking them. Okay, we got that. Makes sense. It's plausible. But remember, her mother said she wasn't physically able to climb. So again, that is only based off of the assumption she was granted this temporary immunity to her physical incapabilities. Janina would then, with broken wrists, would lift the 25-pound grate and somehow accidentally fall into the 25-foot well, hit the back of her head, not die quite yet because she still is conscious enough to call 911. Again, this is also assuming there's no water in this well. If there was water deep enough to break her fall, then that messes up the head trauma theory. Maybe there was only like a couple feet of water, and then she hit her head. I don't know. I think it's safe to say that none of this sounds accidental, no matter how you word it. You either have suicide or homicide, in my opinion. Plain and simple. Suicide? There's a million easier ways for her to have killed herself than to go to the lengths that she would have had to end up where she was in this well. Then to call 911 after. I don't know, that just sounds janky. I know plenty of people have attempted suicide and then obviously back out and attempt to call 911. Some are successful, some are not. But I mean, isn't there like a statistic that goes around like where women are more likely to like do like a more passive attempt as opposed to men, or a little bit more ballsy and just like take a gun and stuff like that? I'm not going to get into that. It's a little weird. But to push your body beyond its physical limits just to throw yourself down a well if you're hoping to commit suicide seems like a bit of a stretch to me. That leaves me with homicide then, clearly, right? She's found by a city worker who, for unknown reasons, is at the well that day. That part's not weird at all. He's just doing his job, obviously. But she's frozen solid at this point, so obviously there was nothing to draw attention, like decaying, or a smell, or a stench, or an odor, or anything like that. So my assumption is, was this guy just performing his regular duties? Was he supposed to check on the well, like, on a weekly basis? Because clearly it wasn't daily, because he would have found her sooner. Unless he was on vacation. I don't know. There's just too many factors here. Or was there maybe like an alert or malfunction at the well that required maintenance? The well does have like a little mini substation next to it, as well as like pumps there. So maybe there was an alert and he was out checking it. Or was there a much more sinister reason for this man to be out there? Maybe this is one of those cry wolf situations. Maybe the body wasn't being found fast enough for this case to be sensationalized in the media and for him to bask in, because in some cases that is a thing. Or maybe, he knew he fucked up by throwing her in there and knew it was sketchy for a non-city worker to get in there, especially a woman who has no scratches or injuries consistent with going over a chicken wire fence. So he wanted to call it in and seem like just the innocent city worker doing his job. Now, I'm just throwing it out there. There's nothing listed as pointing any sort of sketchiness at the city worker, but it's a thought that I've had and I felt I would share it. Jen does make a comment to the media early on in the investigation that whoever did this to her daughter had to know the location well. They knew they wouldn't be seen, what time of day, obviously, where the cameras were at. They knew where the well was and how to access it without damaging it or themselves, because obviously there would have been DNA evidence should, blood from scratching on the fence and whatnot. But who better would know this information than a city worker? Just going to throw that one at you and chew on that one for a bit. Now, issue number 3. Let me turn on the fan here because it's fucking hot in here. Ugh. Issue number 3 is video surveillance. Now, I have an issue with the video surveillance from the park for several reasons. Turn this down so it's not like blowing into the mic and shit. There. Obviously, like I mentioned before, the camera is on a rotation. I know how those work. I've had previous jobs where I've had to work with both automatic and manual surveillance cameras. My issue, though, is that at some point, if this camera is on like a autopilot rotation where every few minutes it does like a full scan through. At some point, that camera would have had to have panned back to the frame where we originally saw the car entering the lot. Now, how long that rotation is, I don't know for a fact. But this is a security system, so there's multiple cameras, and usually those rotations aren't longer than a few minutes. I feel like if he, say, attacked her there after he parked and then dragged her to the well, that would take a lot of time, and that would probably leave a DNA trail to the well. So maybe she was already unconscious then from like the blow to the head when he's pulling into the parking lot. Okay, but he'd still have to carry her to the well, and again, DNA trail and time. So that kind of just leaves us with the option that either he pulled up to the lot and Janina wasn't with him in the car, which is why there's nothing there, or they got out of the car mutually together without any sort of scuffle or altercation. Both are fairly quick actions, which is why they're both plausible. Which it is, would be based on if the car showed up again when the camera reached the pan, however long that may have been. Usually, again, no more than a couple minutes tops. Plus, the timestamp on this camera names it as camera 4. So my question is, where's the footage from cameras 1, 2, and 3, or any others after 4? And what was on them? Were they checked? Was anything seen? Were they functioning at this time? This snippet of video seems like a carefully picked snippet, and I have a hunch there's more footage that just wasn't released, but might be very vital to the investigation. Now, for my Google Maps investigating, since it seems to be in every episode now, I can't help it but just refer back to Google Maps to solve my issues with cases. I analyzed video surveillance footage from the park that they had released. It's like a 42-second snippet, and it seems like it's going in like slow motion. The car seems like it's driving way slower than usual. But anyway, I studied the footage extensively, and I noted everything that I could. I noted that the parking spots are on both sides of the lot, and it's a very long, narrow lot. It's not wide, it's very narrow. You have the option to turn left or to turn right and park. There isn't any like parallel parking or slanted parking like you see in some lots. The street lamps that they have are very unique, and they kind of remind me of like a 1900s London type of street lamp, if that paints a picture at all. They're unique. They stand out. They don't look like the basic ass street lamps you're picturing. So when I felt confident enough that I could identify this particular parking lot, I decided to use like the satellite images from Google Maps and maybe at least locate what side of the park in location to the well that this parking lot was at. So I went through images of the whole park, and I finally found the lot, because there are multiple parking lots. However, thankfully, this is the only parking lot with the description that I just gave you. The rest of them are either parallel parking lots or they're slanted parking lots. This one stood out. So I located that. And the best part about this is that Google Maps hadn't fully updated the mapping area for this park when you're on ground level. You know how you can drag the little yellow dude and it puts you right on the ground there? There's definitely parts of the park that had been updated on there as early as this year, but the parts that I was interested in had not been updated since June of 2015, guys. That means that those images were from a mere 4 months after Janina's death. Now, don't get me wrong, this took some time and careful placing of my little yellow Google guy, but I found it, and I took a bunch of screenshots so that when they do get updated eventually, I'll still have the images of what it did look like. I was able to locate the surveillance camera from that parking lot, and it's posted on a lamp post there. And what you don't see in the surveillance footage that you do see in the Google images is there is a bus stop located just to the left outside of view of the footage, with several benches. It has like a covering and trash cans and stuff. It's a nice, well-lit bus stop. That tells me that people can pick up a bus there. My thought immediately went to maybe this person dropped Janina off at this bus stop with the intention of her, taking the bus home, and they took off. That would make sense to me. Now, back then in 2015, the area was pretty much like an open grassy field. There was some dirt mounds, like future construction coming, but in 2015, this was just like flat land, grass. It's a narrowish park that kind of gets a little wider on the end, and it's literally right on the bank of the Missouri River. The surveillance footage, I would say, from where the car was to the river is maybe no more than like 300 yards, if that. It's very close. So it's like a strip of a park. It's not this big, wide open area. However, since then, they have developed like a large apartment complex that sits right there at the park. It's really nice, but this wasn't there then. So I took note of that parking lot. The next thing I wanted to do was to locate where the well was in correlation to the parking lot and see just how much of a walk, if any, there would be from this car to the well. I searched and I was able to follow a bike path that hadn't been updated rather than the main road that had, and the bike path was still from June 2015. It goes down parallel to the river for about half a mile before it runs into a well. And on the way there, you also pass a well. So all in all, this park only had 2 wells in it. The first well, the closest one to the parking lot, seemed like it would have been a viable option. So I decided to look at it further. Both back in 2015 and in 2021, this well was gated by a black fence all the way around. There's no chicken wire on it. So that kind of led me to the conclusion that this isn't the well she was found at, because media coverage of her case has like the reporter standing right in front of the well where she was found, and you can clearly see the chicken wire gate. You can see that it's silver, it's not black. And you can see kind of the background area of where it's at. So given all of that information, I was able to rule out the first well. So I had to continue on down this bike path. And like I said, half a mile later, I stumble across the second well. Second well fits the full description of the one seen in the media coverage. It has the chicken wire fence. You can see the well from a distance. You can see the pumps next to it. You can see them sitting on top of this 4 to 6 foot cement block. You can see the cement building right next to it. You can see the gate of, I can't even talk. The opening of the gate has a lock on it. You can see the doors are shut and chained. And then you see outside of the gate a second well access point that looks very similar to the one that is around the chicken wire gate. So, having found the well and realizing that it is half a mile away from where this car was spotted, that brought up some question as well. The red sedan guy pulled into this parking lot a half a mile away. If he had anything to do with hurting her, it would make more sense to park closer to where you planned on dumping her if she was already out cold in the car, for example. So that has me believing if he was involved, he had to have gone to great lengths to get her over there. Unless, maybe he was like, this ain't the place, backed out, and drove further down closer to the well. Again, without the further surveillance footage, there's no way to know this. But I found it odd that the footage released is showing him half a mile away from where she's at. But anyway, B, If this was, say, a suicide attempt, why go for the much harder well grate when you have one with very little gate and fencing and no chicken wire right outside of it? This well grate that wasn't inside the fenced off area didn't even have a lock on it. It's identical to the one in there, but it had no lock on it. I zoomed in. There's no fucking lock on that. So if you wanted to fall into a well, why would you go for the much harder one rather than the easy one that's right there? Sans gate. It just seemed odd to me. Now, the last thing I wanted to throw at you, which I will say, take with a huge grain of salt, comes from Reddit. A Redditor claims that while investigating this case on his own free time, he found a court document that hinted that Janina had some run-ins with the law. He states that she had a darker side of her that dealt with drugs and possibly selling of them, particularly marijuana, which at the time was illegal in Missouri and still maybe, I don't know. The Redditor said that the document, which I cannot vouch for because I've never found it, I've never seen it, despite multiple users asking him to link it, the original poster never did. But the alleged document may have stated to an extent that Janina was an informant enrolled on some of the drug dealers that she was working with. This led to people to theorize that, her death was a retaliation. Again, these are unfounded allegations, but for the sake of pondering theories here, this would make a lot of sense considering the evidence that we know about. This could explain the Alan and Nicole disconnect. It could explain the meeting up or dropping off at a public place like the Isle of Capri. Her distraught leaving the casino kind of deal going on. Maybe even why she was at the park. Marijuana is used for pain tolerance by many, myself included at one point in my life. I wouldn't say this is impossible, but it is also 1,000,000% not deserving of her being dead by any means. In the end, I myself cannot sleep soundly believing this was an accidental death. I have too many questions. Why are her injuries not consistent with an accident, given where she was found and her physical incapabilities? Why was a 911 call placed after she was assumed to be in the well? Did the call include her telling dispatch she was in the well, and that's how they know the call was made from down there? Tracing can range from seconds to several minutes, and it's not always guaranteed to connect. And with known poor connection, it's odd that they confidently state that this was made from the well. Also, with 2 broken wrists and a massive life-threatening head trauma from a woman who suffers from constant seizures. Then, on top of all of that, places the phone in her boot after it drops the call. She has no superficial wounds from the climbing to get over the fenced-off area. She's missing undergarments. This isn't she was drunk and walked off into a well type of accidental deal. This took effort to end up in the well, whether on her end or someone else's, that remains to be seen. What do you guys think, though? Do you agree? Do you think I'm full of shit? Are you somewhere in between, or maybe do you have some theories of your own? Let me know on any of the socials, and while you're at it, drop a like, follow, and or subscribe. I don't bite. I enjoy the love. Please love me. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed exploring this one with me. I want answers. People ending up in wells is not normal, and it shouldn't be considered an accident when it's this fucking weird. Sorry for all my stuttering. I've had about 4 cups of coffee and not sleeping great, but I hope I got my point across here. Stay tuned for more episodes, and in the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Mwah.